11 moves of theory, 93.1 accuracy, a brilliant move by my opponent. This was my greatest win on chess.com. And all this at 4 a.m. in my underwear. The game started off 11 book moves. Here after g6, this marks the accelerated Sicilian dragon by the black pieces, which means that they'll just prefer to develop their pieces on the king side instead of playing some central pawn moves. So I go bishop e3, bishop g7, knight c3, knight f6, f3, and then after castles, bishop c4, my opponent enters a very sharp line that you have to know because there are sacrifices very, very soon in. Queen b6. Queen b6 attacks the b2 pawn, and you need to know theory here. Thank God I do. Bishop b3, and this invites for a very sharp line, as I said. It's a sacrifice. Knight takes e4 here with the unveil of this bishop on b4, and look at these pieces piling up against my knight. If you just simply take back this knight, you accept basically being a pawn down with knight takes d4 or bishop takes d4. So here I played knight d5, which is still theory, still theory, still theory. Queen a5 check, and now c3. The idea of this is that this knight is now attacked in the center, must move either to f6 or to c5, which is what happened in the game. And now we are out of book moves. I take on c6, remove the defender from the e7 pawn, and after d takes, I win back my pawn here, king here, and knight takes c8. So far, there are no issues because I've played this hundreds of times. And so now I continue with castles here. From here, my opponent plays their rook a second time with rook cd8, attacking my queen. And here you're always scared a little bit, but thank God I know theory again because I've been punished many times in this game. So the move is queen e2, which is super counterintuitive. You're putting your queen basically in a pin and just awaiting for like a rook e8. And that's what they played, but he goes rook d8, moving his rook for a third time in 3 moves. I just double down here and go rook fe1, and now things start to get spicy. f5 is played. f5 is interesting because on one hand, you're opening up this beautiful diagonal for my light squared bishop, but on the other hand, you have some nice threats with kind of f4 things, and I start to think of ways that I can get out of this f4 threat, and it's really not that obvious. On queen f2, I succumb to this really nice knight d3, which is a little forks, I don't want to go there. So I look at queen d2 next. Now I give rook d8 and knight d3 things come in, on tempo on my rook, and I didn't like that either. Believe it or not, the move that I played is a mistake, but this move is the best move here, queen f1. Who would have known? And after f4, you're supposed to play bishop f2, and this is slight advantage for white. I mean, don't ask me why. I played queen c4, kind of an avant-garde move, attacking this knight and spicing up my pieces, accelerating my angst of my position, right? Putting these 2 pieces on this open diagonal, preparing bishop d4 to trade off this defender of the king, trying to open this e-file to trade some rooks maybe, and overall I'm happy with my position. And now my opponent shocks me to my soul and plays this astounding move, rook takes e3. So here, my opponent wants me to disconnect my rooks here by taking on e3 and putting a strong piece in front of this king for a potential pin. This is the setup, really. The idea that he has is that on knight takes b3 now, I cannot take with the a pawn because my rook falls. So I have to take with the queen because it's forced, and now this would give queen c5. Queen c5 with a beautiful pin on my rook and king, and eventually I would have to give back this rook because of f4 and GG's. My opponent is up a piece. Here I'm kind of panicking. I see this now, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? It's such a nice move. I can't lose to this. So I come up with a really crafty solution. Here I play rook takes e3 because that's kind of forced, otherwise I'm a piece down. And after knight takes b3, I realized that my opponent, had only 2 pieces for the rook. And so I come up with rook ae1 here, which is the only surviving move of that combination. Rook ae1 has per goal to double up these rooks and prepare a counterattack if you try to defend this knight. Let's say queen takes a2, which is the logical move. You take a pawn, defend the knight. Here I immediately counterattack with rook e8, preparing queen f7 here, and then this is hard to defend. Here the best move for black is knight c1, which is already tough to find, and here I'm very comfortable after rook takes, bishop takes, and I would play queen d4 and pick up the exchange for 2 pawns after rook takes c1, and then just like queen takes b2. If you try to move your knight out 2 ways, knight c5, here I have b4 with the fork, and I'm up the exchange, so this is winning. And after knight d2, I thought, well, this knight is still not really that nice. I believe I have queen d3 here, and this knight is still in trouble. Black has this resource queen c5 threatening f4, and after b4 queen here, I kind of love my position after king h1, and you still have trouble defending this knight. So rook here, I would have rook e8 with the GGs right there. So I was really confident with this kind of attack here. The best move for black to survive and equalize is f4, believe it or not. And after my rook moves, there's queen c5, check to trade queens, but my opponent does a reverse move order of that and plays queen c5 here. My opponent is threatening f4 with a win here, and if I take the queen, I just swap here and it's knight and bishop for rook, and this is advantageous for the black pieces. But then something magical happened. I kind of looked at this knight again and I thought, okay, if queen takes, there's f4 and I'm lost, obviously. But then I just saw and played immediately a takes b3. And this pawn takes a knight, this pawn defends the queen, and this queen attacks this queen, so you don't have time to play f4. I'm winning. Oh my god, I'm winning here. I'm up the exchange, and my opponent blundered. And so here my opponent has to move their queen, otherwise if you trade it's completely winning endgame up the exchange. So my opponent goes queen d6. And now I gain a surge of confidence. Like, I'm winning this, there's nothing my opponent can do. It's a change of psychology for the better in this game. And I go with rook e8 to try to trade rooks. That is the plan converting this game. You want to trade equal material as much as possible, rooks, queens, so that this rook versus bishop is heightened, this advantage, right? So rook e8 threatening queen f7, very, very strong. h5 was played here. Queen f7 is still very strong. To trade rooks just outright would be kind of like winning. But here I saw h5 and okay, the g6 pawn is really weak. I just went with rook e6 immediately. And this is a fork, but it's not that good because of queen d2. And now I can't take because there's mate. So I go with queen e2, kind of have to reap my sowing here, queen e2, and now my opponent goes to g5. I try to trade queens because I'm seeing that this is a weapon I have. The opponent does not want to trade queens because I'm just better and better and better. So I can use this to my advantage to try to win a pawn on a7, and that works because my opponent so doesn't want to trade queens that they'd rather give a pawn than trade queens. And now I take on a7, my opponent goes king h8, h7, and I take on b7. Now I have a rook for a bishop and 2 pawns. My opponent goes queen h4, and now I love what I have to play. I just see a candidate move, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you. You see a candidate move and you're like, that's my guy. That's my guy right there. I just play this immediately almost, queen e7. You can't really go anywhere unless you want to trade queens or you want to trade rooks with rook f6. And so my opponent pretty much has g5 forced here. And the queen is kind of trapped in a stable, if you will. I thought that stables were meant for knights, so I use this to my advantage. I go rook takes c6, now that my queen defends on e1. So there's no checkmate. And after rook d8, a final small trick. If I take here, there's queen takes c1 mate. I go with rook c7. No, no, no. Go back to where you came from on g8. Defend this bishop. And here I just played a little cheeky move, realizing that black has nothing here. Like, black's pieces are all in a bind, can't do anything, petrified like wood. And I go with b4 here. Because my realization is that black so has nothing to do here that they cannot stop b5, b6, b7, rook c8, and I win. Obviously, the engine exists, and the engine suggests because black is in a zugzwang, which means that they have no good moves on their next move except for rook h8, king h8, sorry, you can play rook e6 here. And when he goes king h8, and now you can go rook h6 check. Bishop takes and mate. It's really pretty. And that's how I got my biggest rapid win on chess.com. My new rating was 2308. Then an opponent cheated against me twice that night. My rating got reimbursed, skyrocketed to 2340. My opponent had a rating of 2680 when we played this game. And believe it or not, he lost 115 points from this loss because I think it was his first loss on chess.com in a rapid game. And that's my greatest win. I have my greatest elo on chess.com and I'm living this with you. It wasn't live on Twitch, it wasn't live on stream, but hey, I can make a YouTube video and share this beautiful moment with you guys. Have an amazing day.